this Canberra event for Home Run for Julian. The first thing to say to you is this is all being live streamed. So can you please not get in front of any of the cameras? There's a camera there and a camera there. And obviously if you don't want to be seen live stream, also make sure that you're not in a position that you'll be seen live stream. It's being live streamed to Consortium News. And so next, welcome to country. We need him.
Hi everybody, I'm Karina. And before we start this evening, I'd like to invite you all to join in this acknowledgement of country. So you can feel free to close your eyes or keep them open. But I really want us all to think about this place, Canberra, the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal, Ngunnawal, Ngambri, Ngarigu, and possibly other groups here. And yeah, I'd like us to really feel into the connection of this land and what it means to the people here and what it means to us to be here. And shall I say a word again? And also want to pay respect to all First Nation people of this country and all colonised countries as survivors and whistleblowers of the genocide here. And thank you for leading the way in creating justice here.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I pay my respects to Ngunnawal, Ngambri, Biyuan, the Wiradjuri, and many, many other tribes here. I pay my respects with the nations within this nation, and I thank the Canberra community, and I do hope that your journey on to Sydney goes well, and you're with us too.
Thank you for that wonderful acknowledgement from Taylor and Karina. Now, a few other bits of housekeeping before we start. To get to the toilets, you stay inside this building. You go that way, you go 3 sides of a rectangle because the toilet's right over at that corner. There probably will be a donations bucket circulating somewhere. I'm sure there will be a donations bucket circulating somewhere. So please, if you've got any money for the Home Run for Assange, it would be most appreciated. There's also books for sale there. So I guess probably we all know why we're here. Julian Assange has been a folk hero to many of us for a long time and clearly has suffered absolutely unreasonably. I'm not going to bore you with my take on this. We've got some excellent speakers today who can tell you an awful lot more than I could, and I'd just like to introduce the first one, Bernard Colleary. Bernard Colleary is a former ACT Attorney General, but possibly an even more important reason why he's very relevant to speak today is he's also suffering from the same sort of oppression as Julian Assange. He's currently involved in a court case because of, what should I say, wrongdoings done by the Australian government towards the Timor-Leste government, criminal wrongdoings done, that he has an involvement in telling the world about. And for that, he's been prosecuted. Same situation as Julian. Reporting on wrongdoing, who gets prosecuted? It's the whistleblowers, not the wrongdoers. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker for the night, Bernard Colleary.
It's a great rainy afternoon. I was washing up indoors this morning. I was hanging up one of the children's t-shirts, and it said on the front of it, which was interesting, teamwork, respect, integrity, commitment. And I thought, I wonder if that's t-shirts made in China. So I looked at the label and it said Puma, made in Australia. And I thought, yeah, that's the sort of t-shirt that you often see our Prime Minister Morrison standing next to at all of these openings and that. And it just struck me while Julian's mouldering away in jail, while I'm on the cusp of it myself, it struck me that we're in a sort of era of what I think is called dual moralism. The dual moralism of the British colonial era that our wonderful opening speaker mentioned, the colonialism. I mean, Bible-bashing people went out to those colonies and righteously sought, and this led, of course, to the awful matters like the stolen children era and the rest, where they weren't consciously doing evil like the Nazis were, but they had a blank spot on the root morality with which they were involved. And while we restrict the debate to whistleblowing, we don't see the full picture in my view. The full picture is that somewhere along the line, a dual morality arose, particularly in this country. And it's the dual morality that inflicted the First Nations people righteousness with a blind spot on the real root morality of issues. And the same dual morality of our Hillsong Prime Minister is so marked, and the corruption of his cabinet is so marked, so latent, prevalent, and arrogant. And I won't go through the narrative. Sports rorts, when they speak of the Russian involvement in the 2016 United States elections, but what about in this country where millions were spent in marginal electorates? I mean, what is a more gross deceit and law-breaking than that? And then I'm waiting. I'm pretty well. I have difficulty practicing at the moment, as you know. I shouldn't be at the bar table as someone accused of conspiracy, so I've lost my living largely. But I'm waiting for the brave lawyer who first appears before this new appointee to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, who has not even had 5 years of legal experience as required by law. She's been appointed to a $400,000 or $500,000 a year job, and she will take her place in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal of the Commonwealth. And I think the first lawyer to appear in front of her should state that she has no right to be there. Now I call upon that publicly. I want there to be a call by our profession for her not to be present, not to be taking her place in the AAT. Now, that almost goes back to the 1688, 1689 Bill of Rights, where the monarch sought to appoint their people to, his people rather, to particular courts. So it's an all-round immorality, but it's not a blind one. As much as we can forgive the missionaries of the 19th century, how can we forgive the people who are treating this man that way? How? Because we know those moralists tut-tut about the machine gunning of innocent pedestrians on a street. We've seen that revealed by WikiLeaks. We tut-tut about the excesses at Guantanamo Bay? Of course. And Morrison will agree, that was all wrong, we fixed all that, but we'll keep the revealer in jail. And that's the dual morality that afflicts us. The lack of ethics, the lack of principle, and it's across the board in our government. Across the board. And I'm not preaching, I'm just telling you that as one of the people at the end of that we really fundamentally need a shift. It's not just an argument about the rights of whistleblowers. It's not just an argument about the right of the lawyer like myself to represent someone in good faith. And I was just talking to John Shipton, Julian's dad, earlier on. I was trying to remember when I first met Julian. I remember more his brother Gabriel, that I just cannot put the 35 years back, but they were sharp, intelligent young men, and I think it's an appalling tragedy what's been done, particularly to Julian, who I suspect, and I hate to say it, will not be the same after this, but I think we have to rescue him and rescue for him what the rest of life will bring to him, which I hope is some hallowed status in the workings of democracy. There are some constant, deceitful backgrounding of journalists about Julian, and we know all about that, but there's some I want to particularly, in a couple of more minutes I'll speak, draw your attention to. It's constantly said that the reason why we have to prosecute Julian, and the reason why we, speaking for us they do, have to prosecute witness K, is that we have to keep our intelligence partners confident that we can keep secrets. But the perversity of that is that our honest Five Eyes partners, and I think New Zealand is one of those at the moment, would be more reassured that people in our services would speak up for unlawful conduct, and that would strengthen their confidence in our intelligence agencies. So it is a deceitful, twisted lie to say that, well, the US Armed Forces Committee has acknowledged, and during, I've read the transcript of Julian's extradition hearing, all 134 or 140 pages of it, and the US Armed Forces Committee chairman accepts, and that was common ground at the hearing in London, that no important secrets had been revealed in the whole show. And more to the point, that no significant human source persons needing protection had been compromised, right? So we get back to the so-called Taliban villagers who were willing to speak to our troops. Well, who else knows those? I mean, the arguments are weak, but that's constantly trotted out, that we've got to strengthen our intelligence services and protect them from wrongful disclosures of the kind, that is, it's wrong to reveal murder, and wrong to reveal that we want to keep the impoverished people of Timor further impoverished. And our country is on the cusp of something that's very, very important, and that is that we need a working opposition. Government shouldn't change it simply by default. We shouldn't be joyous at the current situation because we've not had an affirmative statement from the opposition about Julian. And that has to be said, and Richard Marles and those who are briefed by our intelligence leaders, and at the moment ASIS has a man of integrity in charge. He's appointed ethicist, and I can't go into that, but I do know what's going on. But we've had some internal action stress that we need the legal profession, it's starting to stand up. We need them to state they will not appear in front of that appointee. That will be a moment in Australian legal history that I think should occur. Now, if I could just get a brief to be first in front of her, I'll do it. I've got no much more to lose. But that should happen, and my profession needs to stand up. And secondly, we need to deal with the background briefing about what Julian's alleged to have done. I can't for the life of me, and it's a massive study that a magistrate did in the United Kingdom in his extradition hearing, a massive study of the evidence, which of course she rightly said is mostly a matter for trial, but she weighed the issues and she pointed out very clearly that there was no commanding evidence of the excessive things, particularly the Murdoch press was saying. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Our next speaker is David McBride, and he's someone else who faces the potential of jail time simply for telling the rest of the world about the things that are
every small piece of defiance helps. Bernard has helped my case enormously, and witness Kay, because the background into the Defence Force were trying to do against me was like, he's just crazy, he's imagined it all, it never really happened. And then to have the witness Kay and Bernard case, which is nothing to do with me, but everything to do with me at the same time, was an enormous blessing. I could say, here's another person that served his country, here's another person with a moral compass, and here's another person who says we're doing the wrong thing. We're not connected. It's not a conspiracy. The conspiracy's on the other side. And that has really helped, as all the other whistleblowers. And it's good to see Bernard here tonight. And I'll finish on this last point. And the central enemy is what Bernard said. It's that he was too polite than usual, but it's that duplicitousness. It's that I don't think there's two moralities. I think that they're fine. I think that there's a lot of people in government who are pathological liars and are just not who they pretend to be. You see it in the United States, but if they realise that there are a lot of gullible people, religious people out there who as long as they sort of say, I go to church and bash the Bible or whatever it is that they can just milk that and they can steal the money from the church funds, have inappropriate sexual relationships too. They can get away with everything if they bash on certain chords. And these people are bad. And it's particularly bad, like in the Defence Force, when we were taught from day one, I thought that Bernard was reading out a defence thing, courage, initiative, teamwork. In fact, it became so cynical that when they had, a sex scandal, what they immediately did was said, we'll deal with this, but we'll get another buzzword. Another buzzword. Respect, that would fix it, And nobody said, what, really? A buzzword? A buzzword and a colour brochure is going to fix our problem. But that's what they're like. Everything is about front, and it's got out of control. Nothing that they say is what is actually happening. And that's what struck me in the mountains of Afghanistan suddenly, that this force I'd been working for so long was just phony. And everything was at front. Everything was what they call an information operation. They would send back good news stories to win the election, win the spin cycle. It didn't matter who died. It didn't matter how many civilians were killed, as long as nobody found out about it. And that's why they hate Julian Assange so much, because people found out. And people need to keep finding out, but the fact that you guys get that, I'm not going to preach to you because you guys get that. Not, funnily enough, not everybody does. But as long as you guys keep the flame burning, Bernard and I were featured in an exhibition down in Melbourne recently, and there were photos of we look a bit like gravestones. In fact, I couldn't help but thinking we look like the first Christians who got fed to the lions. But anyway, they achieved a lot, those Christians, by their stoic suffering. They probably eat me before Bernard. I'm a bit more chunky. But they would, we're achieving something here, and a little bit of suffering. It's a bit like a 15-round boxing match, and it's probably only a round 8, but I reckon we're going to get there in the end. But again, we would only make it with people like you. If I didn't have, and it's doubly, one last bit of praise. I grew up in Sydney, and I went to an expensive school, and I've got a lot of friends who are millionaires and whatever. And I don't get much support from them. I don't get anything like the support from these private school people. Well, it's not so much putting them down; they're normal. It's putting you up. You know, you guys are out there in the cold of winter and we're there in the heat of summer. And you are very quality people, you know. You might, Australia might understand that, but you are the absolute backbone of Australia. And I just can't say that enough. So thank you and keep it up.
So I shouldn't take things from my own hands. Thank you very much, David, and thank you, Bernard, again. Thank you very much to the two whistleblowers who are here. We really appreciate the sacrifices you're making for all of us. Our next speaker does need some introduction to a Canberra audience, but I'm sure not to a lot of people here. This is Jacob Gretcher, who is the tour manager for Home Run for Assange, and so he is a major part of why we're all here today, and he is here to tell us more about why we are here today.
Thank you, Caroline. I'm not going to speak long. It's my main issue to tell you about the home run. But first I want to acknowledge that we're here on Ngunnawal land, as others have acknowledged before me. And it's important we know this, it's important we keep it in mind. We started in Wurundjeri country down in Melbourne, we moved out to Jaggerong country, up through the Yorta, Warriorta, Dundalin, Wiradjuri, Gungahlin, Jarrett, Gungahlin, and now we're here in Ngunnawal country. And every step of the way we've been welcomed. We've been welcomed by the people, and that's been incredibly important to us. And it is important because when we're talking about Julian Assange, and we're talking about, with respect, Bernard and David, we need to remember, I like to bring things back, they've already said it, what they're doing here is exposing lies. So we need to acknowledge the first set of lies that this country was built on. The lie of terra nullius. And it is still, and it always has been, Indigenous land. And I know from correspondence and things that Julian has said and written that he supports that notion. As the people here, the Indigenous people, wherever we've travelled, wherever I've travelled talking about Julian, have told me time and time again, he's one of us, he's an Australian. And when they talk about him being an Australian, they're not talking about being a black fella. You won't find anyone whiter, quite frankly. But what they're talking about, it's been expressed to me, is one of the people that's been shat on from a great height by the Australian establishment for speaking the truth, just like these other people, Bernard and David, are today. And it goes on. Look, it's been going on a long time. I remember some of the people here, Ben, example, and 30 years ago, my office was just here at the old Kingsley and Childers Street building. And I remember in 1989, while I was up at the NATEX Centre, organising the campaign against ADEX, Australia's International Defence Equipment Exhibition, all those years ago. I remember very clearly sitting there, camped at the racecourse car park, working against the arms companies. And one of the arms companies that we had in our focus was a mob called Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, were exhibiting here, selling weapons control systems all around the Asia Pacific region. And I'll never forget, as we were sitting in that dusty camp, it was a stinking hot Canberra summer, hearing the news that someone has gotten information from the DEC Corporation. And it thrilled us, all of us there at the camp, to know that these new technologies could also be used against the corporations. And then, the next day, we found out that the people behind that were Australians. And I don't know who it was, but apparently the bloke's name was Mendax. And it was the first time for a long, long time I remember going, yes! And we're proud to be Australians. And then Julian has gone on and he's continued that. That was 30 odd years ago. Exposing the lies, not just to corporations and governments, exposing pedophile networks for the Victorian Police, setting up the first free ISP in Melbourne called Suburbia. And he called it Suburbia, he said, because he wasn't interested in the middle of the city. He wanted to harness the power of the people collectively in the suburbs around Melbourne. He wanted to give control of the truth to you and I. And that's why he's in prison. And that's why they're hassling Bernard. And that's why they're hassling David. So the important thing about exposing the truth is knowing the truth. And one thing we've been asking while we're going around the country, it's one thing, and it's a very, very important thing, to bring Julian home. But when we bring Julian home, not if, but when we bring the bugger home, we want to bring him home with the knowledge that his work, that his suffering, that his pain, that his incarceration has not been in vain. Everywhere I go, I talk to people. They support Julian Assange, they support the work of WikiLeaks, they support whistleblowers, they support this, they support that. So I'm asking people now, when you go home tonight, not tomorrow, tonight, go to wikileaks.org. It's a really easy website to use. It's built by the best computer heads on the planet. All right? It's an easy website to use. Type in your favourite politician, your favourite company, the city where you live. All right? And get the information. Because the important thing is, the reason Julian's inside now is not because he knows the information, but because he wanted you to know it too. So when we bring the bugger back, let's collectively tell him that his work was worthwhile, that we're full of the knowledge of what he's done. And that's all I want to say about that. We've been travelling around, as I said, through Victoria and New South Wales, through a heap of people's country, with John, Rain, and Graham's up the back, and Shanaz has joined us for a bit, Holly's joined us for a bit, all different people. Ian's joined us for a bit from Sydney. It's a movement that's growing. It's a movement that's growing, and we're going to win, and we're going to bring him back. And we need your support, so please come over to the table, drop $1 in the bucket, buy a book, John will sign it for you, and help keep us on the road, and help spread the message.
How much are the books?
The books are $40. What an intelligent question from the man in the front row. And you should also go, not just to wikileaks.org, check out AssangeFreedom.network. And this will show you hundreds of groups right around the world with their social media profiles, their addresses, some of their telephone numbers, the actions that they're doing. And when you see that, hopefully you'll be inspired to see the thing saying click, create an event, and create another event, your own event. And keep doing this. Free Assange, one word. AssangeFreedom.network. All right? And Ian up the front can tell you more about that after the gig, if you require any information. Okay, so thank you all. And in travelling here today, it's been my pleasure and my honour to get to know over the years and travel with over the last few weeks, a man who, I just found out the other night that Noble is his middle name, and it didn't surprise me. Please put it together, a man who's looked after his son for all his life, John Shipton.
Thank you. I'm quite moved. So I acknowledge country and big thanks for the hospitality that's been given to me and my family while we've lived in this land. I also want to thank the people that I've travelled with, the crew that have been nominated already. They've been great. They've held each other up and held this. It's rough going, you know, like a travelling circus. We just sleep in the truck, go to the next town, give a speech, hop into bed, get up, off to the next town. made very welcome, and you meet many different people, lots of new friends. But today is pretty special because one of my oldest friends, I can't see him, but he's somewhere in the audience. I've known since I was a boy. That's where is he? He's disappeared. There. There he is, the back there. I'd like to briefly speak about three things. One is quality, the other is values, the third is power. The quality is the work of David, Bernard, Julian, Chelsea Manning and others. They bring to us a quality which we may call truth or fact. That quality allows for reform in governments, in the governance of us. An important point to remember is that secrecy brings about more secrecy. I don't mean strategic secrets. I don't mean those. I don't mean tactical secrets that defence forces need to keep. I don't mean those. I don't mean secrets, for example, all of our medical data, or only to be retained in Australia, on clouds in Australia and held encrypted. I don't mean that. What I mean is that the sort of secrecy that protects the malicious, malign activity of government as they scheme away and brings about a criminologic environment wherein the truth no longer matters and parallel institutions infect each other. And we go into a sort of decline where the difference between what we hold and know in the public and what governments do is always being feathered by propaganda of one sort or another, or that those who bring us truth are covered in obloquy and calumny and chased to the ends of the earth. In the case of Julian now, in the 11th year, the United Nations declared that he was arbitrarily detained. They reaffirmed that in February 2018. The United Nations Rapporteur on Torture said that this man has been tortured and took along two experts to the Belmarsh prison who testified to that fact. Not people who were on Julian's side, but people who examine the effects of psychological torture, of lies, calumnies, smearing, mobbing, and encouraged by the executives of our country. They say there's no accidents in politics. So the acquiescence of my government to citizen Assange in the treatment over this 11 years amounts to a complicity. There are no accidents in politics. The next is values. There will be a climate change conference in Glasgow. All the world's leaders will get together to try and sort climate matters out amongst themselves. The American empire approach will be on values. We hold these values, the others don't. Let me describe to you just for a minute their values. Gideon Polyer is an academic in Melbourne, an Australian academic, estimates that the excess deaths, his expertise is to be able to calculate excess deaths from the normal pattern of life and death. 6 to 7 million direct deaths in the Middle East over the last 20 years. They have brothers and sisters, these people, mothers and fathers, uncles and aunties. They are people like us. When they know of the death of a loved one, they grieve. Can you imagine the pall of grief that sits above the Middle East? It would be as thick as thundercloud. Brown University, a prestigious university in the United States, calculates that there are 38 million refugees wandering the world from the destruction of 7 countries over the last 20 years. That's their values. The values of Julian and David and Bernard and others are clear to us. And so, in defending these men and women, in defending these people, we defend ourselves. In insisting that the government no longer behaves in this fashion, we defend ourselves. Power. There are 24 parliamentarians in the Assange support group in the Parliament. These good parliamentarians keep their ear to the ground. They follow the concerns of their constituents and their own moral judgment and bring to the institution of Parliament the concerns and put it before the executive to right these wrongs. This illustrates our power. It's a power that we have delivered to the circumstances of Julian Assange and David and Bernard. Our power. Emanating, reverberating throughout the world. In the Bundestag, they have a cross-party group, the second one in the world. The first was here. They have a cross-party group. They invite me to address them. The Council of Europe declared Julian a protected journalist. The Council of Europe, 40-odd nations. So we're not by ourselves by any means. The chairwoman of the Council of Europe Human Rights Commission issued a similar statement, a little bit stronger. The Austrian government followed up with a similar statement. The chairwoman of the Human Rights Committee of the Bundestag, the German Parliament, issued a similar statement. Richard Bergen is an MP in the UK Parliament, has 15 parliamentarians. He's putting together a worldwide symposium on those parliamentarians that are deeply concerned with what has happened to Julian Assange and what it means, the meaning of this is the oppression and intimidation so that it reduces the capacity of the ordinary citizen to be educated and to converse with family and friends, to know where to turn next, what to do, who to support. They call it dumbing down on the internet. I don't know about that. I do know that the restriction of flow of information will disable us into making proper decisions on who to support, where to guide our families, how to involve ourselves in our communities. Judicial extraditions, judicial kidnappings, Meng Wanzhou, Julian Assange, Ola Bini, A.G. Barr, the Attorney General Barr, William Barr. He was known when he worked in the Bush administration, Bush senior administration, as the snatcher, because he could manipulate the laws to extradite people into the United States that they didn't like or wanted to hold as hostages or whatever. So a final comment on power. You have, and I thank you for that, raised us up. And in just this is, I don't know, it sounds a little bit like magic, but in bringing Julian home, in some way, a small grain goes into the grief that those people suffer in the Middle East. It sounds like magic, but it's true. I travel the Middle East. The support for Julian is extraordinary. They have a thing there that generally that they believe that the qualities of a child come from the father and they're nurtured by the mother. So they pat me on the back and, you know, they do everything, you know, they hug me or whatever. But just I want to illustrate that what we're doing will bring satisfactions of a small type, but a beginning to those people. Lastly, when Leopold of Belgium destroyed the Belgian Congo, the flux of life cannot stand this sort of thing. And you can see that in the destruction of Iraq involved in Great Britain, no longer great, United Kingdom falling apart. The flux of life cannot bear this. So we have that on our side too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. I'm sure all of us are thinking, what an amazing father Julian's got. And I'm sure what the people of the Middle East said is very, very true in this case, and all cases, I guess. That's the end of our formal speakers. What we're going to do now is have a Q&A, which means that there's going to be a minute or so while we reorganise the seats, I guess, to do this. I'm quite sure what we're doing, but we will be doing it. So, I guess, pardon?
Can you just take questions?
Or do you want to I can just take questions, or do you want to sit up the front? Just take the questions. Any questions? Gentleman in the middle. Stand up and speak loud.
In terms of the inquiry that has been talked about in Parliament, I'm not sure which individual Army Reserve gentleman
Start
was.
again, please.
It's ready. Hello.
Thanks, that's great. It's great if there's another
Sorry.
mic.
I thought there was, but no.
I can speak loud.
Speak loud.
Yeah, just set up.
In terms of the inquiry that has been talked about into the success of the Iraq and Afghan war, I think it was particularly the Afghan war that Australia joined in on. Jackie Lambie has mentioned it. It was on the radio probably about a week and a half ago. Does anyone of our speakers know any particulars about whether or not there will be an inquiry into the purpose and outcome and subsequent loss of the war on Australia's behalf and US behalf?
Any takers for an answer for that?
Sorry, one question.
You might have more like tomorrow, because tomorrow's rally is organised principally by the parliamentary friends of Julian Assange, and so they probably know more about it than our experts do here. Actually, which reminds me, can I ask, when you ask a question, if it's directed to someone in particular, can you say that? Gentlemen over, yeah. Yep. Paul.
Just wanted to ask to embellish what Bernard mentioned in terms of values and you know theirs and ours type of thing. And in terms of what Bernard and David stand for, and the increasing contrast with the current Federal Attorney General.
Do you want to take that one, Bernard, or?
Bernard, come to
Yes, please, yes, if you're close enough, please come to the mic.
Well, I've been deluged in questions about what my reaction is to Christian Porter's situation. My only reaction is huge sadness for the woman involved. Few of you may know, but she attended school here for a time, and in fact she went to school with one of our daughters. I have no comments to make about Christian Porter. I think the real issue is what happened to this woman, and I'm not going to in any way seek to profit from his difficulties.
I've got a question for Bernard.
Sure.
This is about whether Julian Assange would be safe in Australia. So I interviewed George Christensen, and he seemed to think that he would. And the reason was I drew a parallel between the Commonwealth Direction of Public Prosecutions said in relation to Dan Oakes, the ABC journalist who was reporting on war crimes in Afghanistan using classified information, that it would be easy to secure a prosecution, but it is not in the public interest to prosecute journalists. So he seemed to think that that was a legal precedent when the AFP dropped the case. So supposing he was okay in the UK, yeah, he gets off, that means he's safe. Theoretically, he's safe in England. But the big question, and Mary Kostakidis seems to have a lot of doubt about that, about whether he would actually still be safe in Australia after that precedent, that legal precedent. Is it a precedent?
David may wish to contribute to this, but the real risk for Julian is that when he recovers, the fact is there's a new bill before the Parliament right now that means that if any of you by chance use WhatsApp and in your WhatsApp circuit someone is being investigated, this new bill allows the police to access your WhatsApp. And this hideous piece of legislation that went forward last week has been condemned by the Law Council, by all of the relevant bodies, means that Julian will be monitored. And if they can't get him for what they didn't get him for in London, they'll be hunting for him here. That's the point I'm making.
Who's they, sorry?
Those in power. The government. The people that John Shipton spoke of. Those with power. Those with malicious intent. They are the broad problem we've got. It's not a matter of really whether this government we currently have or the next one that we'll have will look at the past. They'll seek to profit from the present. If they jail me, if they succeed in jailing David, they'll be encouraged. And so will there be a place on earth where Julian will be safe? I mean, the real question is, are we going to have a better country for him to come back to? And that rests with the Australian people.
Speak loud, please.
One may be presumptuous. The very distinguished journalist, Colleary, I'm sure many all this like that, is one of the world's leaders in knowing about all these matters. I'm wondering if I could put him on to say a few words, perhaps.
If you're going to say a few words, can you come and say them to the mic, please?
Yes, John.
Maybe clear some space.
I'll go that way.
I did not put that man up to that. But he's put it on me, as I said, sure. I just so happen to have together a few remarks in case one of the speakers interrupted me. That was the backup. What I wanted to talk quickly about is why is it so difficult for so many people to support Julian Assange, to understand Julian Assange? Why is that? Why is we aren't in a huge arena with 3,000 people? And I think one reason is much of the public doesn't understand what's at stake here. It's not just the life of Julian Assange. They take things for granted. We take in the West things for granted because we were brought up to think and to understand that we live in a democracy and we have a free press and we have an independent judiciary and all of these things. But we find out that it's not always true. We don't always have those things. And one reason we don't know about this is because the press in the West, which I've come out of, I worked at the 2 Murdoch papers, the Sunday Times of London and the Wall Street Journal, and a bunch of other newspapers. So I've been on the inside for more than 3 decades. Before I began to run Couture News, the first independent website in history, 1995. They don't report these things. Number 2, what they do report about Assange is the personal focus, his cat. The various smears, including supposedly on the walls of the Ecuador embassy. So they focus on his personality. They make it about him, not about what he and WikiLeaks has revealed. Why? They don't want us to know about what WikiLeaks has revealed. For example, about Iraq, Afghanistan, Guantanamo. But funny enough, in 2010, when WikiLeaks had media partners, the New York Times, El País, Der Spiegel, they did report those things. One reason I think is because these were Republican crimes in the US. So a liberal media would gladly find something wrong with George Bush, as they should have, of course. When it comes to Democrats committing crimes, because let's face it, there's a bipartisan consensus in Washington on foreign policy. The same aggressive foreign policy does not change. Yes, on domestic issues there might be some change, but when it comes to foreign policy, they're in lockstep. Cannot question it. Your patriotism is questioned. You are smeared as being a stooge of a foreign power if you so much as dare to question US policies. And as John Shipton said, causing the deaths of so many innocent people in too many countries. So the Western media tells us that only in countries like Russia and China and Iran, Cuba, US in particular saying this, is where there's political repression, where there's surveillance. Yeah, never in the West. Cannot happen in the West. And I think this is one of the other reasons now why Western people have a hard time supporting Assange, because too many of us identify with our governments, identify with our nation. We're told we're the best. I'm talking about America right now, where I'm from, of course. It's the exceptional nation. There's no country better, has ever been better. We don't do those things. Yeah, there are mistakes here or there. We don't commit war crimes in the United States. Don't undermine governments, surveil the entire population of the US, foment coups d'etats and invasions if necessary. Never happened, Harold Pinter said. Even while it's happening, it's not happening. And here comes Julian Assange to tell everyone it is happening, and not from his reporting so much as getting the documents themselves. You cannot question him. That's why they have a perfect record, because every document published is accurate.
They weren't on getting sources on background that may or may not have had an axe to grind and some motive. They have the documents. Can't question it. And they will not be, somebody asked who they was, the same they, people in power clearly want to get him because of that. Because he's upset the entire thing that they've created, this whole myth that we are exceptional people and we don't do anything. And unfortunately, Australia takes part in too many of those crimes too, that the United States leads them along unnecessarily. You don't need the US. Be your own country, you have your own independent foreign policy with China, have relations with the US and China. I think Scott Morrison actually wrote that in an op-ed something, believe it or not. So that, I think, it's time for people in the West to grow up a little bit and have your own identity. You don't have to link yourself to your government, to your flag, to your nation, but to more universal values that apply in every country. Human values, not Western values. And then we will appreciate, and I think people will appreciate Assange, if that ever should happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Over there. Do you want to come to the front? Because I think probably we'd all like to hear a statement. Here, no. Microphone.
Yeah, like I said, I'm John Dos Santos. I'm from East Timor. I'm standing here because I followed this episode of Mr. Colleary, Mr. Julian Assange for justice. My country was committed no crime. People like yourself stood up, and my country today is independent because people believe in justice, and the justice has done for my country. Now, I cannot understand why a society like Australia, with their laws, which is the envy of many, many countries, have committed a crime, in my view, protecting Mr. Downer. And a man that knows the law, that he shouldn't rob from the little fella. Now, I'm afraid that that's not right, because I came here as a refugee some years ago, 1975. Okay, I came here and I'm grateful that I'm here today, and I witnessed a lot of things, and I followed the atrocity that happened around the world, and I'm really, really, really happy because I got my brothers and sisters here, because you people have stood up for Timor, and now I have Mr. Colleary standing up for something that he, in his job, needs to stand up for people to speak the justice. Yes. You know, and Mr. Bernard and Mr. Kay are condemned by these people, that instead of supporting this man for telling the truth, they're supporting one highway robber, Mr. Downer. Now, why is that the law is protecting criminals and not, protecting the people that speak the truth? That's all I want to say.
Very quickly,
I just want to make a comment. One of the reasons that hasn't been mentioned is that a lot of people love Hillary Clinton, so therefore they don't like Julian Assange. And I've come across it, my brother and sister too, they're like that. They both told me they don't like him. don't like Julian Assange because Julian Assange helped Trump win the election. Yeah. I just wanted to make that comment because it hasn't been mentioned. I was a comment.
All right.
I don't think she was alleging that was a correct statement. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've had the lights just be hot. Yeah, please.
Just to say thank you to all the organisers. Thank you to the home tour for Julian, which this whole event's culminated all their energy and work to bring this together, and all the work around the various centres. Just a question to Legal Mind, or perhaps John or even Jacob. I was talking to Ian last night and we discussed, I understand, first of all I'd like to know what's happened. Julian is held without charge. Julian is held in a maximum security prison in the United Kingdom after being refused to be extradited to the United States because the judge said it would be too dangerous for him to go there. So that was the reason, none of the other issues. But anyway, I'll get into speech too if I'm not careful. So he's in a maximum security jail without charge. On remand, I'd like to know what's happened to Magna Carta's habeas corpus, and also perhaps John or one of the team will know about. I understand about the appeal by the United States against the magistrate's decision on the extradition question, but I understood that almost immediately there was going to be an appeal against the decision not to grant him bail. And I haven't been able to hear or find out. I understand the appeal process, Ian and he's written up about it, Ian's written up quite well. But what's happened to that appeal against at least bail and getting him out of Belmarsh, while the big appeal is happening?
Thank you. Does anyone know enough to take that question on?
Okay.
John doesn't actually. John is.
John,
do you want to take this one, John?
Hello, Roy. Thanks for coming down. I gather we're being organised to come up and see you as a group up there.
You're up there earlier in the year.
Yeah,
so
they want us to
we're
come.
popular. Good to come. Good area. Great to see you.
With the circumstances, the defence asked for an extension of time, which was given until the 29th of March to submit their appeal against the appeal. As for a bail application, you don't make applications that you think you're going to lose. I think there's already been 2 bail applications. But I'm not a lawyer and I don't involve myself in that at all. In fact, the defence, I just have a cup of tea with them and say how things are going, anything I can do, and that's all. I just don't involve myself because the English law system is intricate, complex, and requires the melding of law, skill, knowledge of court practice, knowledge of the judges, knowledge of the particular court, knowledge of the High Court, knowledge of the Supreme Court and the judges that are on the list. And so I just say, oh, well, anything you want me to do, give us a call. Yeah, sorry, it's not very good answer.
No, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks. Camera person, do you have a question?
Just for John, I was just wondering if you sent a message to Julian, or you know how he is, or lately.
A cheerio.
No, have you sent a message to him, or do you know how he is at the moment?
Oh.
So I haven't seen Julian since March last year. I think that the jail was locked down because it has a COVID infestation. Julian, they expanded the number phone calls that Julian could make. So he can ring me on occasion. It's guillotined at 10 minutes. So he rings as frequently as he can, and he was particularly interested because this is his home patch, you know. So as we move up and down the east coast of Australia, he likes to hear well, I guess you could call it gossip, you know, the news, what's it like, and so on and so forth. And what am I going to do next, and what will I say, and so on. You know, the usual discussions that the family have. And also he likes to ask me about Gabrielle and brothers and sisters and so on. Yeah. Usual stuff, you know. Just to amuse you, when he was younger, he has an intensity of concentration, although he could be really beguiling and charming, you know, you'd stand there listening to him. But he would say, I can't stand gossip. I just can't stand gossip. I want to learn things. I just want proper discussions. And then after a few years in the embassy, I'd go in at Christmas time and say, what's cooking, you know.
Okay, we're coming close to the end, so maybe just one more question. Yes?
I'd like to ask a question about two words, and perhaps Bernard may care to answer it. One of them is making a seditious utter, not directly associated with Julian, but it is one. And in 1950, a man called Sharkey was asked by Alan Reid of the Sydney Daily Telegraph, in the event of Russian troops entering Australia, what should the response be of Australian people? Of course, Mr. Sharkey dismissed it and said it wouldn't happen. But anyway, he was pressed, and he said, if troops entered Australia in pursuit of an aggressor, it would be the duty of Australians to support the Soviet troops, for which he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was just a view. You may not agree with it, but it was a view. So obviously, maybe there is such a thing as sedition today. The other one concerns a man called Stephen Ritz. He worked here in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Anyhow, he was one day holding a newspaper up in the streets of Canberra for sale. Nothing wrong with that. Anyhow, he was pulled in by the people in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Overseas Trade. And they said, why were you selling that paper? That paper is wrong. Anyway, Stephen says, well, in what way is it wrong? And they said, that is a subversive paper. So anyhow, he was dismissed for his employment. And they asked him also, before he was dismissed, are you a member of the Communist Party? Anyhow, he said, well, yes. He said, it's the most legal organisation in Australia. A majority of people said that it has the right to exist. And, of course, the High Court of Australia said it had the right to exist. So, anyway, he employed an eminent QC from South Australia. Anyway, ASIO took 40, and of course they lost. But what it came down to was, what is subversion? What is sedition? Maybe, Bernard, you might like to comment on that.
Well, there's an eminent retired government lawyer here, Ernst Wilhelm. There's a couple of other lawyers. But we know that when the Foreign Interference Bill was introduced, so the word subversion, the offence of subversion, and the offence of interfering was given new life. Sedition is alive and well now. It's waiting, and it's one of the reasons why I responded to the questioner in front of me as to what Julian's going to do when he gets back, because the criminal code now has all-embracing provisions relating to subversion, foreign interference. All lawyers are now at great risk because in this town, and there are more than 20,000 people working in the intelligence agencies, if any of them have a work-related grievance, and as many public servants do, they will bring a cache of papers to your office. They will drop it in reception before their appointment. You can be prosecuted for the mere possession and control of those papers, even if you haven't opened them. And so I gave a talk to the Law Society last year about the significance for lawyers at the moment of the sedition and other provisions that now exist in the Commonwealth Criminal Code. So that's all alive and well now, which means that the necessity for good internal control of our agencies is absolutely vital, and why the legal profession in the last week has so trenchantly criticised the bill that the Australian Federal Police and the attorney, acting attorney last week, introduced, because those bills reduce the power of internal control and give decision-making to senior police officials, and don't give decision-making to experienced judges, leave decision-making with, and I regret to say, the greatly affected Minister for Appeals Tribunal. So the risks in our community at the moment, although the whole ASIO thing, and whether at the moment they would be doing a due diligence on David's dog, they were the jokes of the communist era, Reds under the bed. But the significance of the lawmaking in the recent, since 9/11, is that all of those excesses that were unlawful, ASIO searches and bedroom searches were unlawful in the Reds under the bed days, they're lawful now. It could be open slather if this form of government continues much longer in this country. Democracy and rule of law are seriously eroded and are seriously at risk.
Thank you, Bernard, for those, I'm sure, very depressing words. Just before we finish, we've got one last brief speak to Louise about the ongoing efforts for tomorrow. She's just going to have to have her.
Thanks. I'm Louise Vera from Canberra for Assange. I had a few things written out, but I left it at home, so I have to sort of quickly remember. Two main things. People always say, what do we do from here? And I know I'm mainly preaching to the converted, but over the last few weeks, we've had such an influx of people join Canberra for Assange. We've now got 410 members, which is just fantastic. They heard this bloke called John Shipton was turning up in Canberra, so they all jumped on. I don't know why. Anyway, look, there's a table over there, and as well as the incredible book, Secret Australia, I've got some leaflets, and on the leaflets there's the contact numbers for myself and Facebook and all that kind of thing. And also the link for Australian, Assange Freedom Network. Okay, so that brings me to, what do we do? Not everyone in Canberra will come out and protest. Everyone's quite scary about that, and I think it's because they're probably mostly public servants and they don't want the work people to see them in the protest. But writing letters is something we can do. We do that productively every week. The leaflet has a example letter that you can use. I can send it to you electronically. Look, if everyone here wrote a letter a day, imagine the impact that could make. Just a letter a day. The other thing I'll quickly say is, what do we read? Because people say to me, well, how do you get this information? And that's a really good question, because
We cannot rely on our mainstream press anymore. And I don't need to talk about Murdoch, but I will just mention even the ABC is getting, more and more controlled and less trustworthy. Look, as a group and the Freedom Network, and we have an amazing wealth of incredibly professionally written articles from all over the world that you can access. If you don't know stuff, you really need to start reading that alternative news. And can I please also recommend to you tonight Consortium News, who are here tonight filming. Consortium News was the first online news agency that we could call them alternative, because they came from mainstream and mainstream failed them. And so that's the sort of thing that we need to start looking at. In Australia, look, it's got a paywall, but subscribe to crikey.com. Please don't watch Channel 7 and 9 and the ABC exclusively. Well, I mean, you can watch them just to see what the bastards are up to, but then actually consult decent, informative stuff. I don't know whether you realise, but Consortium News were one of the news outlets that was allowed to be online to the court during all of the hearings that Julian had. There are a couple of other people. Kevin Costello, who's in Craig Murray.
Yeah.
Caitlin Johnston from Caitlin wasn't, sorry. But
Mary
Mary Kostakidis, yes. So that's what we need to do. We need to do our research. We need to read really well written, professionally written material from all these incredibly talented lawyers, doctors, journalists, and you'll hear in the mainstream media that people like that will be accused of being conspiracy theorists, and that's because they are so threatened by intelligent, informed, principled information. And if anything, intelligent, informed, principled information is not what your government wants you to have access to, sadly. Okay, I wasn't going to mention tomorrow. I really think someone else should do that because I don't remember their details. Oh, thank you. Jacob, please, yes. Okay. Please take a leaflet. And please, if you're new to Canberra for Assange, I know we've got these wonderful friends from Sydney and Victoria, but if you're new and you're one of the people that contacted me, please remember I don't know you, so please make yourself known, or grab a leaflet, contact me later. Okay? Thank you. Oh, sorry, Kate. There's a piece of paper there for email, and look, there's something I'm sorry I forgot to mention. Other people who work together in doing incredible things in Canberra is Wage Peace, and also IPAN, which is the, please help me Kate, the International... Independent Peaceful Australia Network. And Catherine Kelly's here tonight, and they are the people who've been organising the presence at the court, both for David and for Bernard. So that's something. That is a really good thing to do as well. And now I'll hand over to Jacob, please, who'll tell us about tomorrow.
No worries.
Do you want to? Yeah.
I don't mind.
Basically
tomorrow.
All again, but even more so, there'll be the friends of the David Wilkie and Peter Wish-Wilson, so you've got the friends, the parliamentary friends who'll be able to answer that gentleman's question at 9:30 tomorrow outside Parliament House. Show the buggers what we think, that Julian should come home and we should actually stop prosecuting whistleblowers. And before that is, for those who get up early, before that starting at 8 o'clock, yes, the Kings Avenue end of Parliament House. Placard. And the other thing to do, buy a copy of the book and or donate. It costs real money to get things like this together. And so if you can provide some real money, it will mean that the next step of home run for Assange can make its home run and end up with the home run of Julian coming home. Thank you all very much for your support.
Can we get clarity on the 8 o'clock? Can you repeat what happens at 8 o'clock, please?
8 o'clock, State Circle
Kings
and
Avenue.
Kings Avenue. All right, so anyone feel up to it, help us put some flags up, make some noise, make some colour to welcome to Polly's to work on a Monday morning.
Well, it was Melbourne Avenue would kind of be better, but it was publicised as Kings Avenue, is why I said Kings Avenue, because that was what was in the Facebook. Sorry. And then at noon there's the Women's March, which so you can go to the Bring Julian Home rally, then go up to Parliament House and have a cup of coffee and come out to the Women's March. I think that would be an excellent thing to do tomorrow morning, and it stopped raining, so it'll work really, really well. And hopefully I'll see lots of you there. Oh, there is a little bit of food left over, so please grab what you want on the way.
Oh, really? Oh, thank you. So what's your sorry, Mark. I know you're not.
Cecily's not here.